I remember when I read Elizabeth Kubler Ross's book on death and dying years ago. What she said made sense to me, even though at the time I didn't really have much experience with the loss of someone close. But the guidance she provided in that book was so helpful after I entered the world of medicine and began to see death and dying more frequently. I was reminded that even if someone I barely know passes, that there is a process to grieving that needs to be addressed. Living with loss, in all of its forms, requires attention and time. Welcome to GynoCurious. I am your host and creator, Dr. Amy Novatt. From both sides of the speculum, we are here to investigate what it means to be a healer and to be healed. Please follow, share, and rate the show. And just a new plug for a new venture of mine, I want to let you know that I'm now consulting away from the corporate medical environs, where I've been kind of for decades. And I'm talking about all kinds of concerns with folks who identify as female, healing after a cancer diagnosis, the menopause and perimenopause, sexual functioning and dysfunction, abnormal pap smears. These are just some examples of conversations I'm having with women and spending time with them. If you're interested in learning more about my consulting work, please write to the show or GynoCurious@gmail.com, and I can let you know the particulars of this new venture of mine. So today I want to welcome to the studio at Radio Free Rhinecliff, Michelle Tomasicchio. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Amy.
So nice to have you.
Thank you.
Michelle is a certified empowerment coach, speaker, teacher, and a certified grief recovery method specialist. Michelle, before we talk about kind of the nature of your work, can you tell us, how did you come into doing the work you're doing? And it's kind of an interesting combination, this empowerment and grief. It's not a combination I've seen before.
Do you want the background story?
You bet.
Okay. So my background is I'm a licensed massage therapist, craniosacral therapist, energy healer. So I have over 20 plus years in that area, and really working with clients, seeing that how emotions can be lodged in the body, because with craniosacral work, you can do somato-emotional release work where it's on the table and emotions can come up that have been lodged in the body.
You got to talk about that because that's so interesting. How does that manifest when you're literally working on someone? So they're lying on the table and you're doing some craniosacral work, which is a very subtle form of adjustment, right?
Adjustment, it works structurally and it works energetically. I was trained through the Upledger Institute. So all I'm doing is facilitating. I'm allowing the body to heal itself, whatever needs to come up.
So how do those emotions manifest with people crying or laughing or
crying? They remember things, or usually it's crying. Mm-hmm. Tears come up, and then we'll have a conversation. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? Is it a memory? I'm not inputting anything. It's just I'm leading them. I don't want to predispose their brain to go to something that isn't there, because our brains we use imagination. So we have a conversation to it, and then guiding them to the best self. Like, what do they need to say? Maybe it's an organ in their body that, they're grieving over. So
interesting. So you were doing that work for a while.
So I was doing that work for a long time, and my husband suddenly died in 2014. And that was a shock to my system.
That's, thank you for sharing that. That's hard.
And that was a shock to my nervous system. Mm-hmm. And I was young. And it was weird because I remember shortly after he died, probably the next day or that night, it was like 2 a.m. I knew there was a part of me that knew I have to heal. I have to find the healing. And if I don't deal with this grief, it can be lodged in my body. It's like I had to walk my talk that I worked with my clients. So I did all the things. I went to grief therapy. I went to grief support groups. I was looking for online grief support for widows. And some of it helped. It helped intellectually, but it didn't help with, when it happened, I felt like somebody took my heart literally out of my chest, slammed it on the pavement. It shattered in a million pieces, and then it was shoved back in my chest, and then I was supposed to function.
Wow, that's quite an image.
Yeah.
Oof, yeah.
So I did all the things and it helped for a little bit. But as a griever, after all the attention that's on you from services and people calling and writing, 4 months out, it was crickets. I tried to go back to work and I'm like, I can't do this. And some of the things that my clients said thinking it was helpful was really unhelpful, emotionally unhelpful. So I went on.
Can you give an example of that? I mean, it's just because I know that, part of what I look forward to us talking about today is how individuals grieve individually and different. And yet there are these kind of universal phenomenon that go on, which is what I think Kubler Ross talked about. But I guess knowing that when I've been in the office, when something really hard has happened to me personally, and what patients say can in fact be triggering. Can you kind of just give us an example? Because I think it illustrates, I think people want to help and they're not always, I don't know, maybe thinking about what they're saying. I don't know.
So I'll touch on that. And the one thing that I'll get into with why I got into this is that as a society, we are not taught how to grieve and we're not taught how to help grievers. We have been programmed since we were children. We model what we saw if we had a loss. So what was unhelpful was when I went back to work, I'm helping people. That's my job. Somebody asked, so you think you're going to date?
Ooh, yeah.
This was a month after. And then what really nailed it for me was a client I'd seen for many, many years. And this person's back was like this table. She didn't want to do the craniosacral work, which was fine because the craniosacral work is so subtle. It gets into your brain and central nervous system. And while we were on the table, she shared about how she had a loss when she was 9 years old. Her father died. She had like 4 younger siblings. And her mother was such a wreck that at 9 years old, her little brain said, I have to be strong for them. And in that moment when she said that, I'm like, oh my God, it makes total sense. This is how you operate in the world. This is why your back is like this. And you're constantly coming in with the same issue, trigger points and everything. And I was like, it was a light bulb moment for me. And I'm like, I don't want to be that. And that's, and this isn't a judgment. It's just an awareness. And that's how she operated in the world. Very, take charge and all that. But
the weight of the world on her back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All the appearances look great on the outside, but inside this is what was going on. So from that moment, I was like, this is not healthy. And I Googled and I found the grief recovery method.
And what is that, please?
So the grief recovery method was created, I'll go back. So the author is John W. James. He wrote a grief recovery handbook. And basically how it came about was in 1977. He was married and had a daughter. They were expecting a baby. The baby died within a few days after being born. So they were obviously devastated. And he did all the things, same thing, grief therapy, grief support groups for people who've lost children, but talking about well-meaning, educated people, even medical people. Therapists said things to him and his wife like, you're lucky you have another child. Or that they were fortunate enough that they were young enough that they could try again. And even well-meaning religious people said things like, well, God just needed another angel, or God won't give you anything that you can't handle. So he began to try to figure it out. And he got the message, we have to be strong. He had to be strong for his wife. He had to be strong for his daughter. But yet this pain in his heart wasn't healing. And somehow he created these exercises that helped him heal. This was after the fact because his wife and him, though, weren't talking. She was being strong for him and he was being strong for her. And they weren't talking about the feelings. And then they ended up getting divorced. He developed this after the fact. And word got out about what he was doing. And grievers started to contact him. what are you doing? Like, how have you really healed from it? And he showed them the exercises. And then he wrote the book in 1977, the Grief Recovery Handbook, which anybody can get, and you can go through the process. But it's very different walking through it with a specialist. So he created this program, and it's been in effect for well over 40 years. The book has been translated in 20 different languages, and there are offices on 6 continents. Their main office, the Grief Recovery Institute, is in Oregon. And it's an educational program. It's not therapy. It's not support. Each week, you walk through specific exercises. When I went through it, I did it myself. I read the book. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm doing it right. I'm doing the exercises, and I got some relief from it. But I found a specialist actually in Woodstock that I went to her office. And by the 4th session, because of my training, and this is no judgment on her, it was just, ended up like coaching her by the 4th session. So I'm like, there's something to this. Grievers need to know this. I started a widow support group shortly after that, but didn't bring this because I'm like, I'm not sure what I'm doing. I kept looking at get trained as a specialist. And I'm like, I really need to do that. So
great. So did you have to go to Oregon to be trained?
No.
Okay.
Now, you used to, but ever since COVID, the world has changed. So it's online training.
So how long was that training for?
The training is, believe it or not, only 4 days.
Wow. Okay.
And I know it sounds like, how can you be a specialist? But you learn what to say, what not to say, and how to help grievers go and walk with them through a program. Again, it's an educational program.
Right.
I am not a therapist. I am not a licensed clinical social worker.
Do you know about other students there? Do they tend to be people who are grieving their own personal losses?
Usually.
Yeah.
They have, I don't know, hundreds of trained specialists around the world doing this work to help grievers, because back to we're not taught how to grieve is there's a lot of myths and misunderstandings about it. So we've heard things like, don't feel bad, replace the loss, grieve alone, just give it time. Time heals. Time doesn't heal. Time heals if you do specific actions to heal. Because really it's a heart thing. It's not a head thing. When you go and try to figure out why I feel so horrible, I'm trying to figure out with my intellect how to heal this pain. And sometimes therapists in well-meaning who really aren't trained in grief like this, you keep repeating the story over and over again. That's what turned me off of grief support, was people were in there 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, dealing with a really tragic loss and still living as if it was happening right now.
Wow. Oh, what a burden.
Yeah.
So I guess let's get more granular in terms of what are the exercises in this method. It sounds like takes you out of your head and into your heart.
Oh my God. Yes. yes. That's exactly what it does. Because the thing is, first of all, baseline human beings, they want to be loved, seen, heard, and appreciated.
Amen.
So many times when someone is grieving and somebody doesn't know how to support them, it's an unconscious thing. Oh, I don't want to upset them. I don't want to say anything to them. I don't want, if they cry, oh my God, what do I do? So what I've learned even from my work as a healer is somebody's crying on the table, they need to express that. Like you think of little kids, they cry. If you allow them to just get it out or scream or yell and don't interrupt, it's over. Right? The same as with grief. People want to talk about it. They want to talk about their loved one. They want to say their name. But those of us supporting grievers sometimes I don't want to get them upset. So
yeah, people are really worried about doing something that's not quite right. And you're right. In our society, in our culture, we've been given no tools. Certainly no narrative to help guide us through it. I mean, even as a physician, there was never any conversation during residency, medical school about how to talk to people about death and dying. Can you imagine? I mean, it's just it just astonishes me.
Yeah.
Because not only is it hard to take care of someone who's actively dying, but also the dynamic of family or lack of family, or the dynamic of the other care providers in the room. There's a lot of stuff going on. And then, of course, how one responds after someone passes. So can we talk about what those exercises that you've spoken about look like or sound like or feel like?
So the first thing is you have to understand, we go through the myths and misunderstandings about grief. Like these things that you have to understand how we've been programmed as children, these things that are emotionally unhelpful that people say. Grieve alone, time heals, don't feel bad. So,
Platitudes.
Yeah, platitudes, exactly.
Yeah.
And then the next step that we do is, you really have to have 100% honesty with yourself. So one of the things they talk about that you learn about is these Academy Award recovery, meaning, how you doing? You just had a loss. I'm fine. But inside, you're dying inside. No, you're not fine, but you're putting that on because you're concerned about what that they're going to judge me. Oh my God, I'm a lunatic because I'm crying all over the place. So you have to get a framework.
Is that the same as, what Kubler Ross talked about as denial? Is that the same as denial, you think?
So I'm going to talk about Dr. Kubler Ross. The thing about Kubler Ross, and that's one of the things we talk about, what she wrote about was the 5 stages for death and dying for people dealing with a terminal illness.
Right.
And what has happened...
In the late 60s, by the way.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago.
A long time ago. And what's happened is that has been slapped on for grievers. And it's not the case. And even she had a regret later in her life. She said, I regret that work got transferred to people who are just grieving from a loss. And a loss can be anything: death, divorce, moving, pet loss, change in job, financial change. So it's not the same.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was one of my questions.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
So the thing is, I would say, I know grievers in denial they've had a loss. They may be in disbelief.
Ooh, I like that differentiation.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
The one thing she does talk about is anger, which, yeah, you can have anger too, but her framework does not get slapped on grievers. It's really somebody who's dying, terminal illness.
Seeing their own loss of life.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, keep going. I interrupted you because it's fascinating.
Where was I?
So I asked whether denial was the same as this response to someone asking, how are you? Oh, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's like I'm a wreck and I can't believe my loved one is gone, or I can't believe I'm going through a divorce, or I can't believe I lost my cat. Like, we're not honest with ourselves. So that's the first thing. It's okay to be honest. It's okay to have tears without expecting, we don't learn how to hold space for people. So then the next exercise is, once we get, you need to have that intellectual framework, is we work on, you need to recognize, what are you doing to help heal that loss? You have to become aware of, it's called short-term energy relieving behaviors. What are the things you do? A lot of grievers, because they're trying to heal this pain that they aren't able to express and nobody's supporting, is they turn to food, alcohol, drugs, binge watching TV. Now it's, your phone, and you're scrolling because you're looking for something to replace the pain. So then somebody that's walking with me through this, get honest with that. What's going on there? Because once you become aware of your patterns, it's like you have to have awareness first to help heal things, right?
Yeah.
And then you go through what's called a loss history graph, because here's the thing. Planet Earth, we've had losses since the time we were born. So if you consider, when you were born, you were given a backpack, and for each loss that wasn't fully expressed, like maybe at 7, you lost your favorite dog, died, and mom and dad said, don't cry, honey, we'll get you a new dog tomorrow. Like, you haven't gotten to express it. That's replace the loss. That's one of the myths. But you pick up a boulder and you put it in your backpack, and then first breakup, another boulder goes into your backpack. You lose that job, another boulder, on and on and on. And then as you get older and you have a, pretty devastating loss, that it's a cumulative effect. So now you have that and all those past losses. So we go through a loss history graph we look at the day you're born to the current date and why are you here. Usually it is a death or a divorce. And then you plot your losses based on intensity. And from there, you pick one relationship that you want to work on. And there's tools for that. We work on a relationship graph and we look at both sides of that relationship, 100% honesty, because there were good times and there were bad times. So you have to reflect on that. And then the last exercise is called a completion letter, where you're crafting it in a certain way where you're saying goodbye, not to the person if it's a death, but to the pain. And I'm telling you, Amy, it's an energetic shift. Again, you can do this work on your own, but it's so different being heard. Like your heart is heard.
I'm just sitting here. I'm sorry. I'm stumbling because it's just so astonishing how what feels like such a simple, honest approach that has integrity and thoughtfulness is so not applied to most of our losses.
Yeah.
And, I was, of course, doing my own backpack evaluation as you were describing it. And I know it's true for me personally that I was raised in a household where you just didn't talk about it. It's, you move on, you move on, you move on. And I'm really good at moving on. And it's not something that I'm proud of because it's not about pride. It's just that, isn't it interesting, the patterns we learn, you're right, at such an early age. It's modeled by our parents and then our grandparents and for a lot of generations. And I wonder I guess I'm wondering about the time is such an interesting issue around grief. You're right. One of the platitudes is time will heal. So I want to talk about that platitude in particular, but I was also thinking about how we all individually might process all of those exercises at a different rate, at a different, like somebody might be able to get to, let's say, the second exercise and just not be able to go to the third one. I can't list my losses. I don't remember any losses. None of them happened to me. I would imagine that each journey with your clients is somewhat different.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And what I do is hold space for them and ask them, are you willing to lean into it? You got to have 1% open mind, 1% heart. Are you ready to allow your heart to heal? Because here's the thing, I think subconsciously when I was doing the work myself is that on some level, somebody who's lost someone thinks that if I get over this, I'm forgetting my loved one.
Yeah, I've heard that.
But it's not true. I got to tell you, when I went through it, that the better memories came in. It wasn't blocked. Instead of seeing him die in front of me, like that trauma and just, everything leading up to his death. And even still, I can talk about him and cry, and that's okay.
Right.
Because I loved him. However, the pain in my heart is gone. It's not constricted. Mm-hmm. And things that people said to me would add to that constriction, thinking that they would help. So did that answer the question?
Yeah, it's fine. It's somewhat amorphous, this whole, grief is kind of amorphous. It's individual. It's ill-defined at times. And what I'd like to talk about is kind of the mind-body phenomenon. Again, I was raised in the allopathic healing modality, and the mind and the body were, never connected. It's much less like that these days, but still, you go to a psychiatrist if you're having something going on emotionally, but the gastrointestinal doctor might not make the connection between sadness and your irritable bowel, for example. So how do you help people understand the mind versus the body and the way they might be holding on to their grief physically?
We talk about that. That's one of the things with working with clients is, are you noticing any physical symptoms?
So you have to ask that directly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because, I mean, going through myself, when my husband died, like the week after, I never had a panic attack in my life. The first one I had, I was calling 911 at night because I thought I was dying.
Yeah.
And I had insomnia and anxiety. So all these things trigger because everything is connected.
That's right.
Your nervous system, you get in this negative loop. Your thoughts, your nervous system, it gets in this negative loop because everything is connected. We're energetic beings. Everything's vibrating at a certain frequency. So,
well, we're also, we are a nervous system.
Yes.
And if we're constantly on flight and fight and we're always in this stressful state, if our cortisols are high, we're not sleeping well, then we feel fatigued during the day. So then what do? We take stimulants to try to keep our energy up because we still have to work, or we have to take care of kids, or we have to do whatever our responsibilities are. And it just becomes a vicious, vicious cycle. There's no end to it.
Right.
Because until we get better sleep, until we address the emotional contours of grief, for example, it's hard to move out of that groove, if you will.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
One thing I will share, when you asked about, the mind-body connection, a lot of people that go through this, if they have pain, can be alleviated by the end of the completion letter, because it does work on it. You don't realize what you're storing in your body. Like one woman I work with, she broke her foot and was dealing with divorce. And when we got to the end, she's like, I was doing the work. I didn't want to, but I did the work. And she's like, today I don't have the throbbing in my foot. It was like amazing. Like it was getting worse and then it started to get better.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think even if there are those listening who kind of don't get this sense of energy or don't speak the language that you are, I think all of us have experienced that moment or moments where we're feeling some physical ailment and a stress that we're also kind of intellectually or emotionally dealing with gets relieved. The body feels better. And it's something we need to take better notice of, because as long as we just address the body and not the mind, or the mind and not the body, we're not really addressing the whole experience of being human.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Can we go back a little bit to that platitude of, oh, honey, it will get better with time? There are certainly people who talk about that, who say, oh, I haven't forgotten my loved ones, but yes, it's 5 years since he passed, and it's just not as hard. Can we talk about time?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. The thing is, what we're saying that time doesn't heal is if you have unconsolable grief. I met a woman who 50 years, her mom died suddenly and tragically at 13 years old. I don't know how old she was, but for 50 years, she started to talk about it as if it just happened.
Yeah.
And the pain and all the pain that she had in her body, fibromyalgia. So yes, there are some people who, depending upon what the relationship was, do feel like, yeah, I feel good. I can remember my loved one with great memories. It's just how you respond to it. Did it shock your nervous system? Was it traumatic? Do you still have that physical pain in your heart? Like, this is a tool.
Yeah. I know that this is kind of a peculiar question perhaps, but I know that I've had this conversation with some of my colleagues around, is it easier, and pardon that word, it's not a great word, but is it easier to be with someone who's slowly dying over time and then experience their death versus something that's sudden? And I've always said, I don't know the answer to that. I think that we adjust differently to different situations. Any comments about that inquiry, I guess?
So the thing that I would say to that is, it depends. Like, you can't imagine what somebody's going through because they have a unique relationship with that person. What if that person who's slowly dying, they can't stand? What if they had a difficult marriage with them? And just pretended, but all of that's going on the inside. They may be relieved.
That's right.
Or somebody, it's the love of their life. They have a beautiful marriage together and they're slowly dying. And to see it going through it, they're there for them. But at the end, that person is gone. I can't imagine.
Right.
So it's all relative. It's all so unique. Like it's really hard to label which is easier. And that's the one thing that we talk about in the grief recovery method is you don't compare griefs. You don't compare losses because it's individual to that person. So that's important for me to, sometimes people will say, well, losing a child is the worst thing. Well, what if a person doesn't have a child and they love pets and they have their pets or their children and they lose their pet? For them, it's as if they've lost a child.
Yeah.
So we don't want to compare losses whatsoever. Your loss is unique to you.
Do women and men grieve differently?
I would say yes.
Can you elaborate?
I would, yeah. Well, women are more intuitive and definitely more emotional and process differently than men do. Some men, depending upon what the loss is, they have been programmed to be strong and carry on. And just like how John James started this he was a grieving dad, and the supposed tools out there didn't help him of grief support. So he was looking for something. I guess it depends if you're in touch with your feelings and if you want to relieve the pain.
I think there's plenty of research out there about the male and female brains are different. And certainly the cultural milieu in which we are raised, I don't care where you are, is different for boys and girls. No matter how hard we try as parents, there are so many factors that influence the way a girl might grow up versus a boy. I mean, it's changing as there's more fluidity, but certainly if you were raised with a strong binary system of male-female, there's certain things that happen unconsciously.
Correct.
And consciously.
Yeah.
So I would imagine, it was somewhat of a rhetorical question. I just wondered whether you see it kind of repeatedly in your experience with clients, whether women kind of are able to embrace this process easier, differently. That's a part of the question.
Okay, so to answer that, I would say no.
Okay.
Going through this, there really is no difference. It depends. So here's the thing is what I tell my clients, I can show you how this works. I can't work it for you. If you're going to lean in and do the exercises and not wait till the last minute, you're going to get more out of this. And that's whether you're male or female,
Great.
So the thing is, what we're not doing is, it isn't therapy. We're not talking about the loss, what happened, what this person said, what that person said. It's to get your mind into the framework of the myths and misunderstandings of how we grieve, and then the exercises for your heart, and then to speak it without judgment.
Yeah. Oh. Hard for a lot of folks to go there. Yeah. So for those listening, what would you say are some just basic tools that you would recommend to them around loss? Because we've all experienced loss of some kind, and some more than others. So just some basic ways of healing with loss.
With loss?
Yeah, from loss.
I mean, there's so many amazing tools that help you. The first thing I'll say is that grief is a natural and normal response to loss. There's nothing wrong with you. Number one, there's nothing wrong if you're crying and upset and anger. It's normal. It's a wave of emotions. It just depends the intensity that you experience from it. As far as tools, I mean, I'm not knocking therapy. Therapy's great. Support groups are great if you can get something out of it. There's so many alternative healing methods that I even used. And, I went to see all my colleagues of acupuncture, massage, craniosacral, emotional freedom technique. They've done studies with that helps with PTSD and veterans. That's tapping on acupressure points. Journaling, but also the grief recovery method. It's definitely a tool. And here's the thing is that you can use it over and over again. It's not just for death. You can use it for living people who are difficult in your life. Maybe you have a narcissistic family member. Because when we have a loss, we have hopes, dreams, and expectations that were maybe not voiced or we wish were voiced, and you get to voice them in this. There's apology work, forgiveness work, significant emotional statements that you get to say and, reflect on in this. That's part of the healing.
I'm reminded of a memorial service I went to recently, and I didn't know this person really well, but again and again at these services, I kind of marvel at how everything is positive about this person. And this particular person wasn't particularly nice. And that was not just with me. It's kind of not a very nice person. And yet everybody was, flowery and positive. And it definitely left me feeling like I had been to a theatrical performance. And it made me ill at ease. Now, is it the time to, lament all of his not so nice qualities? No, but I just wonder as a culture whether there's a way in which we can be globally more honest about our experiences with people. And listen, I'm not always easy, that's for sure. So it's just an interesting question that I don't know the answer to, but it is interesting how these services just kind of whitewash who we are and our experiences with other people.
I agree. And we talk about that in the grief recovery method. So again, there's a term called enshrinement and bedevilment. So the enshrinement is, and I hear these stories from when my grandfather died and my grandmother was, he was a saint. And, my mom and my aunt saying that wasn't true. She was tired of cooking. She was tired of doing all these things for him. But after he died, he was a saint. So that's enshrinement or bedevilment. Like if it's a divorce, what a horrible guy he was and all this stuff. But if we're not 100% honest with the divorced person, there is good things. There were good qualities in the beginning.
Right.
And the same with the enshrinement, like you're talking about in this instance, it was just like, oh, it was the best thing since, sliced bread. And it's like, well, no, there were all these other things underneath. That's being 100% honest with it. So I hear what you're saying. I mean, I had in my own recovery through this was that my husband was difficult. He was in recovery himself for over 20 plus years. So all the emotions that go with somebody with an addictive personality, it was tough. Yet when we got to the end, we worked on so many things and we had such a beautiful relationship. But when I went through this, it's like, I didn't like when you did this or said this. So for me, that was freeing, you know?
It strikes me as we come to a close that, we're in a state in this country, in the world, really, where there's so many people express a sense of loss of one thing or another. It's varied. I don't care which side of the aisle you sit on, that there's a sense of loss.
Yes.
And a lot of people have been asking me, like, how are you coping? What are you doing? How are you getting through this? And there are many, many ways people are finding ways to cope, but it strikes me that this method that you're sharing with us today would be kind of a very interesting, perhaps really appropriate way of addressing kind of the losses that we're all experiencing in terms of politics and global relations, et cetera, et cetera.
I agree.
Yeah.
I shared this on social media about this. Like, this program will help you with the grief that you're feeling, experiencing right now with the state of the country. Again, like you said, doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. And of course, I had to take it down because I got some pretty negative comments about it. Like, what do you mean? What do you got to grieve?
Oh,
So,
yeah.
but anyway, yes, we talk about this at the Institute. Like, yes, bring people through this program, walk with them through this for what's going on.
Yeah.
Because there is such a loss that people are feeling.
So if there's someone out there who would like to contact you, Michelle, how do they do that? How do they get in touch with you?
So the best way, I don't have a website yet. I do have a microsite that's on the Grief Recovery Institute's website. So it's shortened. So it's bit.ly/Michelle Tomasicchio, or you can call me.
No, we'll put some information on the show notes so that people can find you, so that they can find you that way.
Yeah, or or email, and you can put that on the show notes. And the program is, I work one-on-one, and it can be done online or in a group. And I don't take any more than 14 people. And it doesn't matter if people are in there with different losses.
Right.
So, but it's beautiful because what somebody's saying from a divorce could possibly resonate with somebody who's dealing with a death.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So I like to end GynoCurious by talking about, pleasure and play. And after such a discussion today, share with us, in the face of your losses, what do you do for yourself that gives you pleasure?
Travel.
Oh, I like that one.
Travel. I love that. That is what regenerates me, rejuvenates me. I love discovering new cultures and traveling far and just immersing myself. I don't like to do the touristy thing. I want to go off the beaten path.
Excellent. May you have many travels ahead of you. Yeah. Thank you, Michelle, for joining me today.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate you.
And thank you to David Hoffman, my editor, and to Jen Hammoud and Maddie Rosenberg, my co-producers, and to the wonderful, delicious Epicurean here in Rhine Cliff, New York. Please come and taste some of their goodies. They're amazing. Please, until our next episode of GynoCurious, be well. Listen to your instincts and intuitions. They are the greatest of teachers, not to be ignored.